Hey, this is Jewel Taker from the Jewel Taker Show on Impact Network. Also, you can watch me and my family on The Tankers on Prime Amazon, or watch me and my sister's Chatter Talk show on Fox. So me and my girls, Dr. Dee Freeman, Monique Eilert Mosley, Real Talk Kim, and Holly Carter, and you're watching Rudy Radio.
You're listening to Rudy Radio, powered by Rude Rangers Entertainment. I'm Terra Renee from African American Women in Cinema organization, and this is Talk with Terra, a show that highlights fantastic filmmakers, artists, and entertainers from all walks of life. We're committed to introducing you to individuals, organizations, and projects of which you're not necessarily aware. And we do this with the intention of uplifting, empowering, and enlightening you. If you can, please share this episode on your social media platforms. We also love it if you text your friends and ask them to tune in. Well, today, audience, you are in for an incredible treat. I have a powerful and unique talent all the way from Oklahoma.
Home in the house.
So excited to have him on board. Mr. Marlon Edwards, please be welcome on the show. We're so happy to have you. How are you today?
I am doing great. How are you?
I am good. I tell you, Marlon, when I saw your work, I was floored. Number one, you wrote your script. Number two, you starred in your movie. Number three, you directed the movie. Number four, you edit the movie. And the style and your execution is just, it's amazing. What drew you into filmmaking?
Well, I always wanted to be an actor. You know, we all watch TV shows and movies growing up as kids. And so I would go to a movie and I would see a performance that I liked on screen, and I would, you know, go home and mimic that. You know, I would say the same thing that the actor said, you know. And so grew up in a middle-class family. And, you know, we were expected to go to college. Like, our parents were educated. Both of my parents had master's degrees. So we were going to college. And so, you know, in school, at my school, we didn't have liberal arts. Like, we didn't have like acting, theater, stuff like that. Like, if you could sing, you could entertain, but there was no avenue to make films or do anything like that. So what I wanted to be was an NBA basketball player. And so I played basketball in high school and in college. And my goal was, I'm going to play basketball in the NBA. And then, you know, once I'm ready to give that up, then I'm going to transition into acting. Okay. And so that didn't happen. I didn't go to the NBA, and I had to have a serious conversation with myself and decide, do I really want to pursue this? Do I want to put my all into trying to make the NBA? And I decided, when I started thinking about a lot of things, like, as long as the NBA season is, and, you know, the wear and tear on your body and all these things, I was like, I really am not that passionate about that. And so I had to decide what I wanted to do. And all this time I've been writing. I had attempted my first film when I was 12. And so when I started working on my master's degree, I had a creative writing program. And so that led me to learn how to write plays, short stories, poems, screenplays in the proper format. And so once I wrote my first play, I cast myself in the role. My my college professor, who was also an actress, she loved my stage presence. She got me immediately a commercial. And then I got an agent, and then things kind of went from there. And so my first independent film, the filmmaker showed me the behind the scenes. And so from that point on, it was a wrap, because I wasn't seeing the kind of roles out there that I wanted to play. And so I was like, if nobody's offering these roles, then I'm going to do it myself. And so that's what led me to be the writer, the director, the actor, and the editor. So I'm an independent filmmaker, and I just do everything film, like, because of that.
Wow. Well, amen. 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 So, the two short films that I saw, were those your first films?
No, no way.
Okay. What was your first film?
My first feature film was called Black Marshall, The Hunt for
Wow.
Dozier, and it was a feature-length film about Bass Reeves. And I actually did that film it's been about 20 years. And so technology was way different back then. You could only film on a film camera or a beta camera. And so we had to shoot the film on a beta camera. And so I've kind of honed my craft like over the years, you know. So the filmmaker that I am today is because of all those other films that I did previous, and I learned from my mistakes.
You know, it's so interesting. One year when we did the film festival, we had Mr. Robert Townsend to do a workshop, and he was talking about his process in making his first independent film, and he really honed in on craft services. I don't know why, but maybe, you know, he wanted to make the presentation more comical. But basically he was saying, you know, he had funded it himself through credit cards, and he was very fortunate to had a national commercial, which he said at the time paid like $15,000, and then the credit cards. So then he had enough, he felt, to make his film. But the craft services, he didn't realize how much food could be consumed.
Oh yeah.
During one day of shooting.
Yes.
So he said he was running around the set screaming, "Don't eat the chicken." So I'm curious now, you know, your take on the behind the scenes, you know, when you did your very first film up until now. And I do know, you know, each film production has its own hidden agenda that happens every single time you execute. What are some of the things that came up, challenges that, you know, it was part of the hidden agenda? And I just want to say before you answer to the audience, it really truly doesn't matter how much you prepare. It's always something. So Marlon, please testify and let the audience know I'm not out here by myself in that assumption or in that thought.
No, that's real. And Robert Townsend talk about food services, like that's a serious thing, because when you have people on set and you know you got to feed them breakfast and some snacks and some lunch and then maybe dinner, because they filming a 12-hour day, that adds up. You're like, wait a second, y'all better bring a snack, you know? So that like eats into your budget. And if you're somebody like me, I'm looking at spending money on all these other things. I don't even think about food. And my wife is like, what are you going to feed people? And I'm like, pizza? She's like, you going to feed them pizza for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? And I'm like, oh, okay. So then we got to start putting those numbers together. But one of the things that we faced, my current feature film that I'm working on, that I'm finishing, is called The Deal. And it's an action suspense thriller about a guy that gets carjacked by a young couple trying to get out of town. And so they take this road trip to LA, and a lot of things happen. So before we were going to film this movie, you know, this time, because normally I will be behind the camera when I'm not in front of the camera, right? And so in years past, my wife would be running the camera for me. But now that we have two kids, it's a lot more difficult to do that. So we actually hired a DP this time, right? And we were like, okay, we got a DP. So that's one thing that we don't have to worry about. This is kind of a bigger film than we've done before. Well, the day before we were going to shoot, and I had my co-producer flew in from New York. He's an actor. He's also in the film. And the day before we were about to shoot, the DP dropped out of the project. He told us, he was like, hey, you know, I talked to this other guy and he's up to speed. And so he's going to do it for you. And we called the guy and he was like, no, I don't really know what you're talking about. And he was like, you know, what kind of crew do I have? Like, how many people do I have helping me? And I was like, you'll have like one or two helping you. And he was like, man, I just can't do it. And, you know, I wasn't mad at him. Right. I was upset with the guy that dropped out in the first place. Right. So for the first portion of the film, I was directing and acting and behind the camera. So I was like doing a lot, but me being an independent filmmaker had prepared me for that. I knew how to run the camera. Like this was a camera that I hadn't used before, but I had already studied it. And so I knew how to use it. And so it took a toll on me, but we were still able to get through it. And so for the reshoots, we were able to have, a nice little crew. So things are going to come up. You never know what's going to happen. You just have to be prepared. And I told you about the Tulsa film that I did. Mm-hmm. The original script was different. There were 3 people in that movie, and it only ended up being 2 because the actor couldn't make it on the last day. So I had to rewrite the whole thing in my head and film it that day and get it done. So that's that. You just have to know, no matter what comes up, you're going to get this film done. It's as simple as that.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And, you talked about earlier how technology certainly have changed a lot for filmmakers. Certainly, you're absolutely right. Starting over 20 years ago, the landscape was very different in independent filmmaking, utilizing those elements. And I want to really talk to you about your thoughts now versus then. But we'll be right back after these messages. You're listening to Talk with Terra, presented by African American Women in Cinema, right here on Rudy Radio.
Confetti, international Formula One driver. I spent to get to Long Island Telecom before they closed. I need to get one of these fantastic deals that Long Island Telecom has, because you can't beat the price anywhere else. Oh, get away from that car. What are you doing? Freaking kids playing with the car out there. Anyway, I'm glad I got here. Wait, what do you mean you're closing? I gotta come back tomorrow? What's your number? 631-833-9679? Oh, stop writing me a ticket.
We're having a conversation with African American filmmakers. Join the African American Women in Cinema Filmmaker Series at the Clubhouse, presented by I Am the Color of Beautiful Global, every Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. AAWIC on Clubhouse. Join us on the Clubhouse app for this inspiring conversation. Hosted by Karen Moore, founder of I Am the Color of Beautiful Global. Join us this Monday at 6 p.m. on the Clubhouse app for African American Women in Cinema's Filmmaker Series.
Hey, this is Jewel Taker from the Jewel Taker Show on Impact Network. Also, you can watch me and my family on The Tankers on Prime Amazon, or watch me and my sister's Chatter Talk show on Fox. So me and my girls, Dr. Dee Freeman, Monique Eilert Mosley, Real Talk Kim, and Holly Carter, and you're watching Rudy Radio.
Welcome back. This is Terra Renee from African American Women in Cinema. And today we are talking with the talented Mr. Marlon from Oklahoma. And before we went to break, we were talking about filmmaking, independent filmmaking over 20 years ago, and independent filmmaking now as it relates to equipment, camera package, all these things. Marlon, how has technology made a difference in independent filmmaking now? And is it easier?
It is a lot easier. So now you don't have some of the same limitations. So when I started my first film, I didn't have any of my own equipment because it was way too expensive for me to purchase. And so I had a crew that donated their time on the weekends when they didn't have other gigs to film this movie. So it took probably a year and a half to 2 years to get it actually filmed. And they did the same thing with the editing. So they had an editing suite, and their editing suite had equipment that cost about $100,000. The cameras that they used, even though they were beta cameras, not film cameras, you know, those cameras were like $60,000, $70,000. So all that equipment was very, very expensive. So after I did that film, you know, you fast forward to about 2005, 2006, there was an explosion with a digital camera called the DVX 100. And you know, at the time, this is before HD, but this camera would mimic film because it would shoot in 23.98 frames per second. And so everybody bought that. And so now the filmmaking world has exploded because everybody can buy this $5,000 camera and you can make a film. And so through that, you know, I made a bunch of films and, you know, started learning, and then technology continued to just expand. And so I ended up with buying my own computer with which I could edit. And then, you know, we went from the tape format in the DVX 100 to SD cards and HD. And then we went from 720p to 1080p. And now it's 4K, 6K, 8K, everything. And so you can buy a film camera that shoots 4K for under $1,000 and go out there and film an entire movie. You get your microphone, camera, get your reflector, and you have a computer, and you can film an entire movie with a setup of like $5,000 or even less. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And because of that too, it cuts down on the time of shooting, correct?
It can. It depends. It depends on what you're trying to do. Because if you have a budget, you know, you can hire actors and you can hire your crew, and you can set a time frame of how long you want to film. If you don't have that and you're just using your friends, you know, you got to use them whenever they got time. So that might be on the weekends, you know, that might be after work. You know, you just can't do it when you want to. So you got a 5-minute film that takes you like, you know, 10 days to shoot because you can't get everybody together. But the fun is in making the film. And so when you start making films, you know, use your friends and family and things like that. And then, you know, the better you get at it, then the more you start incorporating more professional pieces, and you just grow from there.
Yeah, I agree. You know, one year we, during our film festival, we actually had we screened a film that was shot on an iPhone in its entirety. And it was pretty good. It was really, really good. And and I think the director, she may have been nominated or received an award for it. But yeah, technology has certainly played the major role, and even in distribution. Because, you know, 20 years ago, you know, tell the audience about that, how it was a monster after you make your film to try to get a distribution deal. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, it was. Back then, you had distributors. And so you were either going to DVD, right? That meant you were going to immediately go on the Blockbuster or Family Video or someplace like that, or you were going to go to the big screen. So those were your only two options back then. And so it was hard to try and find a distributor. And if you were a first time or second time filmmaker, like the deal that you get, you're going to get robbed. You know, like that's what happened to me. Like my film ended up like in Best Buy and a bunch of places like that. But the deal that I got was like no good. But anyway, I wasn't in the power to be able to negotiate to get a better deal. I was trying to get my film out there, right? So then everything has changed now. So when I did my a film in 2012 called Bad to the Jones, which is an action comedy zombie film, when I did that film, I had some distributors coming at me, but they weren't coming correct. So I was like, you know what? I'm tired of dealing with them. I'm going to sink or swim on what the audience thinks about my film. So I put it up on YouTube at that point in time, and I broke the film down into 8 chapters. And that was in January 2013 that I started that. I ended up getting a real distribution deal that released the film later in 2016 based off of me putting it on YouTube. And so to this day, I think I have probably over 2 million views for all of those episodes that are still on YouTube to watch for free. And it's on Amazon Prime now as well. So
wow, congratulations. Woo! That's awesome. That's awesome. Powerful, Marlon. I didn't know you had that type of following. Uh-oh.
I got a little bit. Yeah, I got a little bit. You know, it could be bigger, but I got a little bit.
That is so awesome. Marlon, how do you approach what type of story you will write about and eventually shoot? What's that process like?
I get inspired by a lot of different things. I get inspired by movies. I get inspired by music. I get inspired by history and things that I learn. And so I like all kinds of movies. You know, like back in the day, I was like, oh, I ain't watching no chick flick, you know, and I met my wife. She gave me a totally different perspective just on life, right? And so we watch a lot of quote unquote chick flicks, which are movies I never would have watched, but I watched them and I really enjoy them. So like one of my favorite movies to this day is The Notebook. And so that movie inspired me to want to be able to do a film like that. And so I look at what inspires me, and then I look at what resources I have. So as a writer, I don't write anything that I know I can't film. If I'm not going to write a Mission Impossible movie if I know I can't do it. I'm not going to write a script and then, you know, go try and find people to invest. I can't do that. I don't have the time to do that. So I have to write what I can film. So the latest film that I'm working on, The Deal, that's what I did. I figured out what resources I have. I said, we're going to make this film about 3 main characters. They're going to be in a car driving across country, and what can happen. And so, you know, I thought the film would be a lot more inexpensive, but, you know, it ended up being more expensive because I thought we could put cameras in the car and just drive, but that's not how it worked out at all. But it's still a lower budget type film with a high production quality because I didn't have a lot of locations. I didn't have a lot of actors. The story is very simple, but it's good. And the acting is very strong. And so in my opinion, as a director now, acting is very important. Like I had already mastered all the other things, but then what I realized was that everybody's acting has to be on a certain level to make your story 100% believable. So
that is so true. That is so true. And that segue right into my next question. You know, you seem to have a good eye and your discernment is very sharp. Do you literally, when you walk down the street or you're driving to go to a store somewhere and you see someone, let's say, for example, you've already written your script and now you have the idea what type of roles or how you want to cast, rather. Do you literally see those people when you're out and about? And how do you do your casting process?
So I don't see the people when I'm out and about. I have a pretty good idea in mind about how I want to use, like when I write the script. Mm-hmm. Like I already know who I want to play certain parts. So for this last film, we had a female lead, and how I wrote her in the script was she was, you know, she had natural hair, naturally curly hair, and she was, you know, very attractive, you know, strong in her presence, and, you know, she was sexy, right? Mm-hmm. And so I had an idea in my head of what that looked like. And so what I do when I don't know anybody that fits that type of role for me, I go to Michelle DeLong, who's a casting director here, and I tell her what I'm looking for. I give her the breakdown, and she will either set up the audition for me or she will send me, you know, some auditions that people have already done, and I will choose from that. So what I did for this role is, you know, she auditioned about 7 or 8 women, and one of them stuck out to me immediately. You know, her name is Billy Merritt. And so she didn't look how I had pictured in my head, because she looks like she might be mixed between, you know, Black and Native American, and she does have some Native American in her, but she just had the essence and the aura of what I was looking for. And so, you know, one of my producers on the film was like, hey, maybe we should add some diversity to the film, and, you know, maybe we should make the female character white. And I was like, hell no, we ain't doing that. Now, that might sound strange coming from me because my wife is white, but I was like, I am a Black filmmaker making a predominantly Black film. And it is important to me for our sisters to shine. Like, if we don't put them up, who else is going to do it? There's not going to be a white director that's going to be like, yeah, we need a Black female lead right here. That ain't happening. Ain't nobody doing that. So if we're not doing it for ourselves, we can't expect for anybody else to do it. And so he was like, well, everybody's looking for diversity, and what about our audience? And I said, you know what? As Black people in this country, when we make something that is great and our community responds to it, everybody picks up on it. Mm-hmm. So I don't make movies thinking about what the audience is going to respond to in that kind of way, because if that was the case, I would be Hollywood. I would be all about the numbers and who we're going to have in the film and all that kind of stuff. I was like, it's got to be about the art. It's got to be about the story. And if I'm making concessions now, when I have this kind of control, what will I do later when I don't have that kind of control? So I was like, no, I ain't selling out. No.
Well, kudos to you. Thank you for standing that ground. On behalf of Black women everywhere, thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Marlon, we met we met before, but we were in Tulsa. African American Women in Cinema was in Tulsa hosting a historic film festival in which we was very fortunate enough to screen your incredible films that actually dealt with, one in particular, dealt with the race massacre. And I definitely want to talk to you more about that, but we have to take another commercial break. Please don't forget to share this episode on social media. You're listening to Talk with Terra, powered by African American Women in Cinema, right here on Rudy Radio.
I'm Dan O'Shea, Executive Director for Maureen's Haven Homeless Outreach. It is our mission to support the homeless in our community. We provide an emergency winter shelter program, a day center, and support services to help the homeless in our community. With your help, we can continue to provide services so critically needed to the homeless in our community. Please visit www.maureen'shaven.org or call us at 631-727-683.
Welcome back to Talk with Terra. I am Terra Renee from African American Women in Cinema, and today we are talking with the talented Marlon, the most powerful independent filmmaker in Oklahoma.
Thank you. I just got an award. Thank you.
Marlon, your film that we screened recently during the centennial commemorative of the 1921 Tulsa Massacre, which was such a horrific tragedy. I am both feeling an array of emotions as it relates to that. One emotion is certainly a lot of pain for what took place, but also inspiration to know that in the 1920s that our people had came together and helped one another and build a very successful model that we can now look at and really truthfully follow after that, because they created the blueprint for that. But the film that we screened that was yours dealt with the tragedy, and I want to just hear from you. How did you learn about it? Because I heard a lot of people, even in Tulsa, said that this was erased from their history books, and even now it's a challenge to get it put back in. That's what I heard. So you can, certainly shed light on that status. And how did you hear about it? And, what did you immediately feel, and what did you wanted to? Well, let me let you answer those questions first, and then I'll get back to the third question.
Okay, so I don't really remember how exactly I found out about it, but it was about 20 years ago. So it was about the time that I was doing my first feature film about Bass Reeves, who was the first Black deputy U.S. Marshal in like the Oklahoma Indian Territory. And so I heard about it, and these kind of stories for me, I don't know, they just have a certain effect and impact. My favorite movie of all time originally was Young Guns, and it was a Western film about Billy the Kid. And so I just thought I was just watching a movie, but at the end of it, you know, they had some text that came up and it told you all these things like this was a true story. And I was like, wait a second, that was a true story. So I started questioning that. And my dad was a history professor, and, you know, I went and asked him about it, and I was like, you know, this really happened? Did Billy the Kid really do this? And he was like, oh boy, that's just Hollywood. And I was like, no, I think that really happened, you know? So I went, it encouraged me to do my own research, and I did. And I really dove deep into the Old West, Billy the Kid, and all these things that happened. And I found out that story was absolutely true. So it had a profound effect on me, because I said, I want to make films like that inspire people. I want to make films that teach, that show people something that they didn't know, that make them want to go do something else, you know, dream, you know what I mean? I want to have the same effect that film had on me on other people. And so when I heard about the Tulsa Massacre, I immediately wanted to do a film about it, but I just didn't have the resources. And so I said, okay, it's going to come one day. I'll just wait. I'll just hold off. And then about 3.5 years ago, you know, God was just working on my heart, and he said, you know, you got to do this film. And I was like, you know, how am I going to do this film? You know, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of moving parts. I ain't got that kind of money. And so the story came to me, because the massacre is not just about the big thing that happened. It's also about the individual stories. How many people had their own individual story? I saw a painting when we were down at the Centennial where a father was looking out the window with his shotgun in hand, watching the buildings burning, while, you know, holding back his 2 little kids and his wife. They were trying to figure out what they were going to do. And those are the kind of stories that we don't hear about all the time. Like, people had to do what they had to do to survive. And so I was able to come up with this story in my head about, you know, what would a person in this situation, what would they have done? And so when that story came to me, like, I knew it immediately, and I wrote the script like the next day. And then from that point, I was just, you know, ready to go film it. And I put the pieces together, and, you know, we did it. And the actor that played alongside me, his name is Brooks Ryan. He said to this day, like, all the films that he's done, he said he gets more compliments about that film than any other film that he's done. And so he, you know, thanks me for allowing him to be in the film. And I didn't know that the film would have that kind of impact. I hope that it would. And so I'm glad that it did. Wow.
Now, Marlon, did you share with me that you recently found out that you are a direct descendant of, please share with the audience.
Yeah, so when the Tulsa Centennial commemoration was coming up, and I was getting prepared for that, you know, my mom, you know, probably about 2 months prior to, she was like, you know, I think we had some family in Tulsa. And she was like, you know, I'm going to look into that. And I was like, okay, you know, cool. But I'm thinking, you know, we didn't have any relatives or ancestors, you know, that were in Greenwood. I was like, no, that's not true. And she came back, and she was like, she had all this information. She had the census, she had the address. She was like, so her grandparents lived in Greenwood, and her mom was 5 at the time that the massacre happened. And so she never really knew how they ended up in Oklahoma City in the black part of town called Sandtown. But that's how, like, they were driven out of Greenwood, and they moved and never looked back and never went back.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. You know, Marlon, as the President Biden came down, thank God, and shed light on that history, because remember, they were reporting it as a race riot.
Mm-hmm.
And
They thought they were slick. Y'all ain't slick.
And I am so glad that he publicly said it was a massacre. I'm saddened to learn that bodies were buried, and I'm glad to learn that, there's this whole, effort now to find out where these bodies are buried. And we had, during the film festival, we honored the great-granddaughter of J.B. Stratford, who had the hotel that he had to leave and eventually end up in Chicago. And Laura Stratford was telling us about the story, and she bears a striking resemblance of her great-grandfather. It was pretty eerie to see that. And then later we found out that her cousin who accompanied her, Lauren Usher, ended up doing the introduction to President Biden when he came to Tulsa.
I read about that.
Yeah, we were pretty happy that story was able to be told. And like you said, your family members did not look back when they ran, and it appears to be the case here as well with the Stratfords.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of that history that we don't know about. Mm-hmm. And that's the reason why, I want to do a feature film about the massacre. People calling it a race riot back then. The reason why they did that was so that the black folks from Greenwood couldn't collect on insurance. If it was a riot, they were like, you caused this yourself, so we're not giving you no money. But everybody knew what that was. And so they also kept this under wraps, right? They didn't want the public in the United States, they didn't want everybody finding out about this because they knew what they did was wrong. And so for years, this hasn't been taught. And, we see a push in some of these states not to even teach, about slavery or racism in schools. But, sometimes you have to look at this country like it's a person, right? A lot of times we don't like to look at our faults. If we're writing a book about ourselves or a movie about ourselves, like, we're not going to write anything that happened that was bad unless we came out of it and made it a big success, right? So we don't want to face ourselves in the mirror. And that's what the United States is doing. The United States say, yeah, we had slavery, but you know what? We abolished slavery, So it's like the United States is patting itself on the back, but not really addressing the issue, And so we have to first learn about the issue to see what existed back then and how it is prevalent today, because everything is systemic, right? Nothing just happens overnight. And so we have to see how it is so ingrained in our society and where it stems from to be able to even try and fix it. And so that's where we are right now. Everybody's like, well, what do we do? Well, the first thing that we got to do is know where we came from, right? We have to know what happened back then. We have to acknowledge that.
That's
reparations.
Right.
Reparations need to be paid. Reparations need to be paid for slaves. Mm-hmm. Slaves built this country, right? Cotton was our major export, which made us a superpower in the world, built on tax-free labor, right? Never paid any slaves anything. And the value of that for the 250 years that Black people were slaves is anywhere from 24 to $90 trillion. Mm-hmm. That was the value that they brought. Just think about that low number, 24 trillion. Do you know $1 trillion is like 1,000 billion? That's a lot of money. And we're talking about 24 of those. And so when the slaves were freed, they just said, you free. There was no 40 acres and a mule. There was nothing. So what do you expect for these people to do when there's still Jim Crow, black codes, and segregation happening? Where are they supposed to go and what are they supposed to do? How are they supposed to be successful?
That is so true. Well, there's more to discuss, but we'll be right back with Talk with Terra right here on Rudy Radio.
Hi, I'm Dan O'Shea, Executive Director for Maureen's Haven Homeless Outreach. It is our mission to support the homeless in our community. We provide an emergency winter shelter program, a day center, and support services to help the homeless in our community. With your help, we can continue to provide services so critically needed to the homeless in our community. Please visit www.maureen'shaven.org or call us at 631-727-6831.
Welcome back to Talk with Terra. I am Terra Renee from African American Women in Cinema, and today we're talking with Marlon, who is a talented and powerful filmmaker and educator, and so happy to have him today. Audience, you are certainly in for a treat. Mr. Marlon, you were definitely giving us the truth as to, certainly what transpired and where we are now. I have a quick question. I heard before I left Tulsa, I never got the opportunity to follow up, that even though President Biden came and shed light on the Tulsa matter, that the Oklahoma governor is refusing to include this story in the history curriculum for the school children. Is that true?
I'm not sure how true that is now. They had they had a Tulsa Massacre commission, and they were trying to figure out how they would incorporate and teach the curriculum in schools. And this was sometime last year that this was going on. But what we have seen in some of these like Republican-led states are that they are passing bills to keep racism and talking about slavery like out of the curriculum. And so what happens is you see some states that'll try something, and then if it works, then other states will try it, right? And so it wouldn't surprise me if that is going on, because I mean, look, that has been going on like this entire time, right? So there's going to continue to be a fight about that. And so we just have to continue to bring exposure to it. And how we bring exposure to it is we talk about it, we make movies about it, we make documentaries about it, and we just keep pushing, for these things to be known. So, I mean, what else can we do?
I agree. I'm curious, reparations, when you talk about it to certain communities, and I'm not even talking about folks that don't look like us. I'm talking about within our community. There's some variations on what they believe reparations should be and what it should look like. One of our guests who attended the film festival, she got up and talked about it and said, we want a check. But then there is some who said, no, we don't want the money, but we want, rezoning. We want equal access to be able to own homes in great neighborhoods. What is reparations to you, Marlon? So
I disagree with the, we want zoning and we want access to this and that. No, it needs to be reparations. Like when you think about what the slaves contributed, like we deserve that. And it will be different if after the slaves were free, there were opportunities given to African Americans in this country. Like we were told we were going to get 40 acres and a mule. And if that had happened, then Black people today would own 160 million acres of land.
Wow.
Okay. And so wealth, you build wealth in this country. One of the ways is by owning things, land ownership, right? And so reparations has to be paid, because if you just give everybody a check, that doesn't change anything. Like you're going to have some people that are going to invest it, right? You're going to have some people that are just going to spend it. And you have to understand that in our community and in our society, what we push is materialism. We push consumerism. We push, keeping up with the Joneses. If you can afford this car, go buy it. If you can afford this house, go get it. But we don't teach ownership and really how to build wealth. So if you give a bunch of people that don't know this money, then they're going to blow through that money, right? And so that doesn't change anything for the next generation. You have to give people ownership. Give us the land that we were promised, because we were promised the land and didn't get it. But then they came out with the Homestead Act and gave, white people and immigrants from different countries, like millions of acres of land, right? And that wealth built up through generations, right? So like, give us what's fair. And it's not, don't even give it to us. We've earned it. Like, that's how it should be. But in my opinion, I'm not sure that will ever happen, because you have to look at the situation like America is a bully. Okay. So a bully is never going to do right by you until they're made to do right by you. Right. You can't ask the bully, hey man, please don't take my lunch today. I really like you. I think you're cool. I like that shirt you got on. that bully gonna be like, man, give me your lunch, right? And so,
That's true.
yeah, and so that's what America is, and that's what America has done. What did they do to African Americans? What did they do to the Native Americans, right? And so America is a bully, and as long as we are standing in a place where we don't have power and we have to ask them for something, they don't have to do it. And then we're, running around trying to figure out, well, they didn't give it to us, so now what do we do? Well, we have to come to the table with a certain amount of money and wealth to get that respect, to be able to not ask for something, but demand something. And so that has to start, with us until, they do something right.
I agree. That's awesome. Well, Marlon, you told us about, your next project you're working on. I'm super excited about that for personal reasons. Outside of the film projects you're working on, is there anything else that you have in the pipeline that you would like to share?
So I am part of a nonprofit organization called the Code Foundation. And so we want to garner positive change and demand equality. And so I've been working on that when I can. It's something that I'm very passionate about. We want to educate, right? We want to do that in a variety of different ways. We want to teach people how to build wealth. We want to teach people the real history of this country. Like, we want to, focus on the community and just doing like community building. So that's something else that was, heavy on my heart. And I was trying to figure out, what can I do? Like, how can I help? And so, that's one of the things that I'm working on. So you can go to thecodefoundation.org and kind of see what we're working on. You can look me up on YouTube under Marlon, Marlon, Ladd, Ladd. That's my film name. Or just Google me and you can just kind of find out what I'm doing and keep up with me or say hello, whatever you want to do.
What about your Instagram and Facebook and Twitter? You have any of those social media handles?
Everything on social media. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, and it's all under Marlon Ladd. So you can find me pretty easily.
Oh, that's excellent. And Marlon, what would you say to those who are listening by way of inspiration, those who are following in your footsteps, who see you as inspirational, such as I? What would you say to those people who are coming up and wanting to make films and may not have the wherewithal to do it?
Well, what I would say is that, for me, I'm a dreamer. I've always been a dreamer, and just don't let anything stand in your way. Like, I decided a long time ago that I would no longer see the obstacles in front of me, but instead make sure that those obstacles see me, right? So what that means is, look at me because I'm coming and I'm not going to let you stop me. So there are ways to do whatever you want to do, but curb your expectations about what it is that you can actually accomplish, because that will keep you from being disappointed. If you want to make a film, don't have the expectation, oh, this film is going to get in the theaters and it's going to make me 20 million the first time. Like, if you do that, you're setting yourself up, for certain failure. So, why don't make the goal to do a film first, right? You start there. And you know what? You're going to fail plenty of times along the way. Failure is a part of life. You can never learn anything or build any kind of character without having failed first. Now, the people that keep going are the ones that have learned from that failure. The people that don't, they don't learn from it. So don't run away from failure. It's going to happen, but do everything in your power to prevent certain types of failure. Because you want to be inspired and you want to keep going, and whatever it takes for you to do that. You're going to have people that don't agree with you. You're going to have people that are going to tell you to do something else. They don't have to walk in your shoes, right? My parents wanted me to keep working in law enforcement at the job that I had because they didn't want to see me hurt. They didn't want to see me struggle. I walked away from that job to become a filmmaker. And I know that that's not about them not being supportive. It's about them not wanting to see me hurt. But again, at the end of the day, they're not walking in my shoes. So they don't understand what it's like for me. And so nobody is walking in your shoes. So you have to determine what is right for your life. And you can't let anybody else do that for you.
Wow. So well said. So well said. Can you share, Marlon, maybe one or two highlights from your journey that really confirm and sealed the deal for you to continue to go forward in this trajectory that you're in?
Yeah, so we were filming Black Marshall one night, and we had the biggest action sequence that we were filming. It was a night scene. So night scenes are hard to shoot because you got to have light and stuff like that. And so it had rained that day, and it was supposed to rain all night. And so the camera crew, they told me, they were like, hey, Marlon, it's supposed to rain and we're not going to be able to get this shoot done. And so if we couldn't get the shoot done, we couldn't get the movie done. And so I stepped out there before we were going to shoot, and it was raining, and I just prayed to God. And I said, just please, let us shoot this scene. And the rain stopped.
Wow.
And we shot the scene and got it done. And it was great. And that was just one of the things that just told me, like, I'm on the right path. And there are other things. I mean, you can just feel it, but that was one of the big stories that stood out to me.
Well, that is powerful. And thank you so much for sharing. And I don't know where the time went, but they're telling me that we have to go. Marlon, you are excellent. Continue doing what you're doing. We need you for such a time as this. Your level of enthusiasm and inspiration is what the world needs. And we thank you for just following that calling, that God-given calling that you have. And we will certainly do whatever we can to continue to be of support. Thank you so much for listening to Talk with Terra. I'm Terra Renee from African American Women in Cinema Organization. You can visit us at www.aawic.org. You can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Talk with Terra is made possible by Root Rangers Entertainment. Our creative director is Rudy J. Breedy. Please don't forget to like and share this episode with as many people as possible. We sincerely appreciate you joining us today and wish you continued peace, blessings, and prosperity. See you next episode.